which will help us go through the presentation. So it's going to be interactive. If you don't have a pen and paper or a laptop, please get access to one. If you were part of the initial group, I sent out some links to two vids I'm going to show. At the appropriate time, you'll need access to those vids because I'll play them as part of the show. I explained earlier, if you can use the chat function for me to ask questions, I got Tal on board to monitor. And although there'll be some check for understanding, which will be part of the process, there'll also, I'll give you a chance to ask questions during some of the slides if you feel it's needed, and also at the end. We're going to work in some ghost rooms and have you collaborate. So first two slides have got some interactive activities that you need to participate in so that when you go into your chat room, you have some substance for the conversation. I think that's a complete list of instructions that will help you make sense and hopefully have a little bit of fun as we go through this. I appreciate your time. That's really the thank you. For twofold, A, you've got an interesting culture, which I definitely have. And B, this is another attempt for me to improve my teaching skills, which is complete vulnerability, but also completely honest. Why culture? The initial group that I was talking to about this is an ongoing developmental series. I gave them some choices and the overwhelming vote was for culture. And it sort of got me to thinking, why? And it's back to a conversation I had with Barry Powell's. We don't have clubs in America. We have teams who play in a collection of uniforms with no core values, frankly, no vision, top to bottom. And it's down to the quality of the individual coach for each team to explore culture, core values, and all the other key pieces. So for me, that is a real problem with soccer within America, and it's a problem we need to address. It's a players first atmosphere. Right now, one of the things that detracts from culture is we got players are all important. Players come before clubs and they're controlled by parents and parent wishes. So if a kid isn't told they're great, no honesty or integrity, parent ups and goes and finds another club. So not really a healthy atmosphere for personal development, which is point 3 there. There's just a complete lack in my mind of core values, holistic discussion, core values, character traits. And I think all this, as ever, leads to the great problem we have with players leaving the game. Why culture for me? Well, it's there. This is not about kids kicking a ball. I think it's a byproduct if you get the culture right, but the picture and the quote says it all. Want kids to grow with the right culture and values. And the toughest part of that, increasingly tough, and any teacher will tell you this, any coach will tell you this, is finding ways to instill those values when everyone around them, every piece around them, politicians, video games, just doesn't help in any way, shape or form. So that's it for me. But you've got your own reason why you're interested in culture. So why not add your reasons to the ones I've just given? Because you've got something that drives you. Background story for me was when I was a teenager, I was a mod with a Vespa. And it was all about belonging. I was one of those teenagers who needed to belong to something. And it considered it looking sharp and belonging to a group. And that was another cultural piece. So a little bit of the why. Activity, individual activity, 2 minutes. It says there, you're all responsible for being part of a club or you're leading a club. So as the activity says, write down your vision of your club or your vision of your company and the words that best encapsulate it. I'll give you 2 minutes to do this. Enjoy. 30 seconds left. We should have some background music, probably.
Get a countdown music on now.
Yeah, it's one of those theme tunes from TV, isn't it? Concern is you're all writing about vision and you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you. Activity 2, so it says there, core values. So you've got a vision, and at the center and foundation of your vision are some core values. 2 minutes to write down the core values. I think sometimes people get confused about what core values are: honesty, grit, etc. At the center of your club culture. Okay, so as it says here, read the activity. I'm going to place you into groups. You're going to go into a group. Hopefully this will assign you automatically into groups, breakout rooms, and you're going to take your PCs that you've just created. Should go into rooms with a partner. It'll create the rooms for me. And 5 minutes, contrast and compare your vision and core values with the coach that you assigned with. Hopefully, because we're all soccer educators, coaches, hopefully we're all from the same sort of cloth. There'll be some sort of synergy, but I don't want to control your conversations. I want them to be completely free. I'm going to create the rooms now. Open all rooms. I'm hoping magically you're in a room and you've started your conversation. I can see Malcolm needs to join a room, Brock needs to join a room, and Tal needs to join a room. Tal, can you jump? Thank you. So I'm controlling the time because the clock's not going, but I'm on it, don't worry. I've just assigned a late guest to Riddies and Tall's group. And you've got about 3 minutes left. Rob, I just moved you to breakout room 2. Apologies, I didn't notice that Malcolm hadn't joined.
Wow, that's very interesting, mate. Good for you. So I think, like, for us, I'm just trying to, my other laptop crashed, so I'm trying to grab the details. Just 1 second.
Sure. Tim, are you guys able to see that screen? I don't know if I need to do anything different.
I can see the screen, yeah. I can see the screen, mate.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to go into my drive to pull all the ones up. But some of the key things, that we talked about was environmentally just creating a player-centered approach where first things first, when we sat down to talk about it, it was like letting players explore and make mistakes in a really safe environment. And then how can you facilitate that? I know you've got your pitch, but we also when we have an overarching company cultural approach, but then we also have a specific club. So the one that we have, their entire organization that we built out. And what I did for 18 months, I went from a territory to territory. I got feedback from coaches, got feedback from employees. We sent out surveys, and then we looked to see where things correlate. And one of the biggest things we came back with was a hat culture.
Part of groups in our lives, teams at work,
What happened there? Are you still in? Are you still in the meeting?
We're in a group with Riddy and Fergus.
Yeah, because I got shut out of it. I don't know how. Oh no, I'm back. How can I end the meeting?
I can leave my breakout room and go to any breakout room. It says I can join any,
Okay, I'm going to close all rooms about now.
but it doesn't. I don't have a return to main screen. I guess if I click leave, it will take me to the main room.
Yeah, I'm going to close all rooms.
All right.
Okay, all breakout rooms are going to close in 14 seconds. And hopefully you can all hear. Okay, everybody should be back with us now.
Okay.
So I'm just going to do a bit of cold calling and ask certain people to share. So if I ask you to share the conversation within your breakout room, just unmute and share some of the thoughts. So let's start with Bob and Rob's group, please.
Sure. So there was the things that came across were humility was a common theme there in terms of what we, both cultures that we had and what does it mean. And then we talked about how where did we collect the information from in order to build the culture. So it wasn't just a group of people sat around saying this is what our culture is going to be, and how, we went out collectively to figure out what it was going to be from a coach's. I was talking about it from a company and club perspective, talking to players, talking to some parents, talking to leaders within an organisation, and then how do we implement that? So who's in charge of owning the culture? So it's really the people that are living it every single day. It can't just be one person at the top of the club saying this is what I want the culture to be, because the culture is what you see out on the fields or how people are displaying when you're not watching.
Great.
So the challenge is how you reinforce it.
Thanks, Bob. How about Chris and John? Can you share some of your conversation, please?
Sure. So Tim, we kind of looked at it a couple different ways. So we talked about first what our clubs looked like when it came to culture, and some of the main things that we saw was it was very coach-centered and driven, little to no integration between age groups. It was a toxic environment. And then we talked about some of the things for our ideal culture, and we talked about having common standards and expectations, creating a learning environment that promotes creativity and individuality, vertical integration for skills and complex decision-making. Some of the things we were looking to implement would be integrity, accountability, respect, and a player-centric environment. And then some of the standards or the values we spoke about were adaptability, passion, integrity, grit, resiliency, resourcefulness. Did I miss anything, Chris? Anything that you had as well?
Yeah, just to add to what John's saying, being needs-centered, not just player-centered. So digging a little deeper, person first, developing a club DNA so it runs throughout the whole club, developing that golden thread and just being ingrained in the community.
Right, and it sounds, I think, like we're all on a very similar page. So let's try and add a bit of meat or bones to some of this. There's a million definitions of culture, and probably like myself, you've all looked at the different definitions. And I think what you do is find one that resonates with you. And Coyle's initials work on habits for teaching and learning were good. And the culture code was another move for me in a great direction. But that is a definition of culture that just resonates with me, because as it says, something you do, it's the person you are. It should impact everything that you do and the way you treat people. I sent you the links for the vid, so if this doesn't play, please just watch the Coil vid. I'm sure you've seen it on YouTube or wherever.
Tim, we can't hear the volume this end.
Go to options, view options, and then share your computer's audio.
I married a Cleveland girl, and 6 years ago found myself living close to the team that was the perfect opposite of the Cardinals. The Indians last won a World Series in the Truman administration. But then something kind of surprising happened. My phone rang, and the Indians were interested in bringing in some new ideas. One thing led to another, and I took a part-time job as an advisor. And then something really surprising happened. Cleveland got better. Better cohesion, better trust, better performance. The budget didn't change. The culture changed. Leaders made small decisions that had a big impact on that culture. And for the last 5 years, the Indians have the best record in the American League, and even better than the Cardinals. We went to the World Series. Last year, we broke a 100-year-old record for consecutive wins. And all in all, it's been like watching a rocket take off. And I had this front row seat. That experience sent me on a journey built on a really simple question. How? We know that culture is by far the most important thing you do as a leader. And it all comes down to this simple question. How do you unlock the potential of your culture? You face this question every day, in every meeting, when you send an email, when someone has their first day, when there's any tension at work. How do you craft and support good teams? And how do you build your skill at being a cultural leader? I spent the last 4 years going inside many of the best performing cultures on the planet. Places like Pixar, the San Antonio Spurs, Navy SEALs Team 6, Zappos, IDEO, and a Serbian gang of jewel thieves. And here's what I found. We have been thinking about culture in the wrong way. Traditionally, we've thought of it as a soft skill, vague, mysterious, a little bit magic. But that's not really how things work. Beneath the surface, there is a deep grammar of human cohesion. Creating great culture isn't magic. It's a leadership skill that you and your people can learn. And that skill comes down to delivering 3 critical signals. Number 1, safety. Sending the signal, you are safe. Number 2, sharing risk, mutual vulnerability. Signal 3, story. Shared narratives, creating a common goal. In this series of videos, we're all part.
Before I play this, because you've got the link for this as well, I would add to Coyle's book with The Captain's Club. If you haven't read The Captain's Club, read The Captain's Club, because it's a book written by a New York Times journalist, but it talks about the best teams throughout history and pins it down to a cultural architect, that cultural architect being the captain of the team. And if you read the book, and it's obviously steeped in research about teams that were truly successful, but it comes down to the strength of leadership and the captain's ability to impose a culture. So as coaches, we always want carryover. So some sporting evidence, and I'm sure you'll watch your vid.
Mate way a team from the wrong side of the world can dominate world sport. I think one thing, people don't understand that all New Zealanders are underdogs. And that sense of having to prove yourself to the world is, I think, one of the core drivers behind the All Blacks. I think there's a huge amount that business can learn from the All Blacks. Not in terms of the sort of the cliched sport analogy, but I think there's some really core driving principles about the way the All Blacks approach what they do. One of the equations used is that performance equals capability times behavior. So if you're really ambitious for exceptional results, your role as a leader is to create exceptional circumstances, the circumstances that can enable your people to be the best that they can possibly be. One of the phrases in the All Blacks, the mental skills coach Gilbert Anoka would say that pressure is a privilege. That if you're not feeling pressure, you're not playing hard enough. That you want to be in a discomfort zone all the time. And that's a sign actually that you're starting to make some progress. So famously a blue head, red head scenario that they work out, where red head is when you're losing it and choking and feeling a great deal of pressure, and blue head is exactly the opposite, is being clear and accurate and on task and precise. The trick is, how do you make that leap from red head to blue head? Karen Reid will look at every corner of the stadium to get the big picture. Richie McCaw grounds himself by stomping on the ground. But all of it is about getting into the moment, and so you can play your own game. Richie McCaw, the All Black captain, has 100.
So obviously the thing that people picked up on from the legacy book was the humility part, with every All Black sweeping out the sheds. People try and steal little bits of culture like that and weave them into their own. And yes, humility perhaps is a core value, but another soccer example, and we all know what Pep's done at Man City and the cultural piece with bringing players from around the world and having them really buy into the loyalty around the city. So all the things they did on studying Manchester and everything. So we take all these stories from tremendous soccer teams, and hopefully we do a bit more research. So this is research I did for a presentation at the National Convention on team, and quotes there for you to read. But if you read the quote carefully, several things stick out. As coaches, we'd all, if anyone told us there was a practice that would make our team 53% better, you'd do it every day. Wow, 53% better. And yet we still focus on, I guess, what many people would be hard skills rather than the soft skills that this talks about: resilience, trust, well-being, creativity. They, for me, are all core pieces of a great culture. So some thoughts, because you wrote about your vision, some thoughts for you to reflect on. 3 right there. Who knows about it? How well do you share it? The values that drive your vision, how clear are they? And what systems, so what makes it practically come alive in terms of delivering your vision? And I guess the last part, so we look back on what we've tried to create with our teams, with our clubs, with our organizations. Is it working? So it says there, your vision for coaching is just the starting point, hopefully, of a high quality culture. And as the little circle diagram says, hopefully within your vision, you have coaching systems, coach developers, better coaches, and therefore better athletes. And they all revolve in and around each other. I'm going to ask you to reflect. I'm going to help you reflect with a chart, and we're going to do some scaling. So scaling we've all done at some point in our lives. You reflect on something you've done and rate yourself. 10 is excellent in the scale we'll use, and 1 is not so good to being absent. So there's a simple chart. And there's the activity. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do it. So pretty time pressed, but just choose a column. And that's an example. If you look at coach development, I don't know a club who've got coach developers. People have a DOC who's supposed to trot around and watch teams and is trapped just coaching a few teams. So in the coach development column, if you haven't got coach developers, obviously you don't get a 10. But choose a column, entirely your choice. I'll time you with a minute and scale yourself on as many categories as you can. Because I'm hoping that the pieces that there resonate with you as key parts in a system of coaching excellence. If we're going to talk about coaching excellence, I believe everything that's on that screen is a key piece. Choose your column. I'll give you a minute and then I'll call on people to share their scores. Minute starts now. While you're working, I'll talk about why holistic tracking is circled. I haven't found a soccer club in America who do holistic tracking. I found some that do academic tracking. I've found some that do tracking of, I guess, grades and things, but that's as far as it goes. And we're talking about the general well-being of a child. How much sleep do you get? How's your diet? Emotionally, how are the things with your family? I haven't found a club that even pretend to do that. Give another 20 seconds. Okay, appreciate your time with that. We'll do a bit of cold calling again, so people can share their thoughts on how they did. Michael, what column and how did your scaling go?
I went for the athlete development. In terms of a development model, I gave myself my environment a 5, because it's kind of in my head, it's not written down or solid. Sorry, just getting rid of the little one. It's not solid, but I know what I want to do, where I can recognize where a player's at and what they need, and in terms of age or ability. But it's not solid, and it's not part of my club. It's just kind of in my head and kind of almost a soft skill for me. Athlete welfare, I put a 4 because, yeah, I do certain things, but again, there's no process. It's just very much me keeping an eye out for it. So maybe it's even lower than the book. Holistic tracking, I gave myself a 3 on my environment 3. I do bits, but it's not systematic across all my teams. I've got 3 teams. With my older kids, I introduced some stuff for periodization purposes, where I've actually got one here, I think. They fill in a card. They fill in a card before the session, which rates their fatigue, soreness, food and hydration for the day, sleep quality, their mood and the stress, and their overall kind of readiness to play. And then if people were giving themselves a low sleep quality, we'd have a conversation. And so I used to track that in a graph. So if someone's always showing up on a Wednesday with low sleep quality, I'd be wanting to know what they were doing on a Tuesday. But that was for only my older team, because there was a purposeful fitness element in the session, and I was trying to get a good gauge for how ready they would be for that. With the younger teams, there's nothing else. It's just, again, I work on some stuff about grit. I work on some stuff with grit and e-colors. I've introduced e-colors, so grit and growth mindset, e-colors. And that ties in with the IDP plans, because that's part of their IDP plan. So yeah, and so I gave myself a 6 for an IDP plan.
Okay, appreciate the wonderful honesty, so thank you for that. And I would suggest that you're probably doing a bit more than most, even with the street piece. which is a little bit vague with the holistic tracking. I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to pull out more from people, but I would ask that you do this. Do the scaling with all the columns. Take a picture of it. I'll share some stuff, but I'll give you a good idea, because you've probably all got a great vision, but a vision for one team isn't enough. And unless you're tackling all these areas within your club, within your organization, are we really going to get to the place where we want to be? That would be my question. So it's not simple, not one size fits all. It's not a simple solution. Give you a starting point. I think the starting point is where we just start. If you do the scaling, you realize it's a big problem. If with your vision statements and your core values, you had vague ideas that is not concrete, that should be concrete information written in a language which is easy to understand and somebody can grasp on and take hold of. And too many of these vision statements are just wordy, meaningless documents. And the vision statement should be tied to core values. Decide on what your non-negotiables are. Can't have a culture that is willing to accept everybody. It's not for everybody. Core values and activities that bring them to life. I actually like this point. So this is from a podcast. So you've got to find a way to bring your culture to life. And I think you can do that with session plans. So, I don't know, take a street soccer plan, street soccer session where you've got 3v2s and different numbers up and numbers down, where resilience is obviously going to be part of it because, as we all know, typically kids complain, we're playing numbers down, it's not fair. So perhaps resilience is the core value you bring out of that session. Perhaps you can make that a point at the end of the session. So certain sessions, you know, can tie to certain core values. Takes an extra piece of planning, takes some extra care. How are you going to make it explicit? Another idea that's up there, which is stolen from a podcast. Start the session, just take two kids aside, two kids you trust, and say, oh, by the way, as an example, I want you to be really caring today. I want you to help every kid with the problems, every kid with the equipment. I want you to help me. So prime two kids. At the end of the session, see if the other kids notice, which gives you the opportunity to talk about, okay, we talk about being caring for each other as part of our culture. Next stage with that conversation is, tomorrow in school, I want you to be more caring than normal. More caring for your schoolmates, more caring for your school, more caring for the teacher. Next practice, I want you to tell me concretely how you did it. Because if we're going to talk about core values, we have to give kids ways to live them and bring them alive. Otherwise, it's just words. Same with coaches. You can have coaches model respect. You can have coaches model respect in meetings when you're presenting information. I don't know, sessions just aren't good enough right now. And professional learning community, this is a big one for me within coaching courses. Everybody's heard me say this. Most people on here have that. Is it a real honest community? Are you in a club where the honesty and the vulnerability goes as far as we just smacking each other on the bum and saying great job? Because culturally what we're saying to the kids is anything will do. And I don't believe that's an answer. So the overall message from this is, you've got your core values, you've got your vision. How are you bringing them to life in a daily way for your players and your coaches? Because if you don't, we'll never end up with a club. That's the end of the presentation. I'm going to ask Tal to tell me about questions in the chat box that may have been mentioned. And then again, being cognizant of time, because I promised myself it'd be 45 minutes. I'll give anyone a chance to ask any questions. We'll close up and you can go and enjoy your Friday night.
Yep, no questions yet, Tim. I think the interactivity led them to not put any questions down in chat, but I'll ask one if you don't mind.
Shoot.
how do you go, or what's your best recommendation? How do you go about an issue where maybe you're not running a club, you're not a DOC, you're just a trainer within a club, and your non-negotiables and your core values don't necessarily match up with the DOCs?
I think it's a difficult one for me to answer because of my age and experience, in that I would no longer put myself in that situation. Simply because when I did, as a younger, less intelligent chap, it just led to misery. So if I've got these certain non-negotiables and core values with which I live my life, it's just incredibly difficult to be part of a club that contradict those. Classic example is with tryouts and people hiding scores, or kids being picked because they're related to certain people. That for me became an environment that I just couldn't be part of. And I've worked with organizations that have pulled out of clubs where that was suggested. I know that's an incredibly easy thing for me to say, and that financially it's not advisable, but I would suggest that if you put yourself in an environment that contradicts your core values, you end up in a sea of misery.
There's, I can't remember which book it's in, but it's in either How to Make a Great Team by John Gordon or Transformational Leadership by Josh Metcalf and someone else. And he basically says just create a mini culture around your team. And then everyone knows that if you get a culture right, your team will be successful, and then people will see your success and come to you for advice. So sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's hard, probably hard, easier said than done, but that was his advice.
Appreciated, Michael. Thanks, Tom. Any other questions?
Are you going to share the presentation?
I'll share the presentation. I have a request, and this goes out to everybody who joined us. As ever, I've got an agreement with some of my fellow soccer educators to build a best practices for teaching in the webinar world and in meetings. So all vulnerability, all honesty, completely up front. One of the reasons I'm doing this is to carry on to try and improve my teaching skills via the web, flipped classroom worlds, which may mean I can have a facelift as well, actually, if I get the camera right. So by all means, send feedback. I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thanks very much. Enjoy your night.
Cheers, Tim.
Cheers, Tim. Cheers, guys.
Tim, have a good one.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Timmy.